So this is, speaking of media not covering things, this is something that I think has got probably a really low amount of coverage considering its importance, and that is the student murders in Mexico. 43 people, student teachers, that were murdered. It's a long, complicated story, and we're going to try to break it down for you as best we can tonight. There are a lot of things that basically go into this. The idea that why they were killed, the scapegoat for why they were killed, and the conversation of who's at fault and what does it mean for Mexico. Haven, you brought this topic to the panel, and I'm going to let you take it and give people a little bit more background on it.
Okay, so earlier this month, there was a protest, a peaceful protest of student teachers who wanted to have more access to funds to help with their education system in the area. And there's already been a little bit of unrest in Mexico for various reasons, some economic, some for social programs. And the area of Guerrero, what happened was these students just disappeared. And for a while, for 6 weeks, family members were wanting to know what's going on, what's going on. The government came out, putting out a conference saying that these kids were agitators and they were becoming violent, and then they just, whatever happened, they disappeared. And then out of nowhere, the bodies were found in a trash heap, completely burnt. And there's a lot of implications that the mayor of the area had a lot to do with the murder of these kids and sending in the policemen that are kind of very much corrupt and run by the cartels to go in and remove these social disruptors out of sight, and doing it in the dead of night. Now, what's happening now is that there's been a lot of unrest. They've even gone to the doors of Mexico City and started burning things down. And on the anniversary of this Mexican Revolution today, a lot of people are calling into question the legitimacy of the PRD, which is the People Republic of Mexico, the running left government, and calling into question their legitimacy and whether or not they are corrupt. And I guess the people are just completely tired of being manhandled and murdered left and right.
So the question that moves forward, of course, is the government says they did everything they could. As soon as they found out about it, they brought in the military. What do you think about that?
Well, the government says they did everything good.
Right.
They could, but if you look at the actions of the mayor the days after these disappearances, they pretty much went right back to work as if nothing was going to happen to them. And for a very long time, the bullet point that needed to be conveyed by the government was that these students were violent or in some way incited this type of reaction, and kind of victim blaming and saying these guys attacked us and they were handled and whatever happened, it's because of them. And then slowly but surely information is starting to flow out that this was a peaceful demonstration. And now that it is, the government is kind of backtracking, trying to clean up their image a little bit, and really throwing the mayor and his wife under the bus, which wholeheartedly they should be thrown under the bus because they are the direct proponents of these murders. But it's more of an extensive systematic corruption where, if a mayor feels like he can remove 40-some-odd teachers and just put them in black bags and let them disappear, and they then wake up the next morning and go right back to work with absolute impunity, that's not just a mayor problem. That's a problem that's up in the upper echelons of the Mexican government.
So before we open this up to the panel, let's talk briefly about the upper echelons of the Mexican government. Many people have said Felipe Calderon, because of his intimidation during the early years of the drug war, is now coming back to cause even more problems. What are your thoughts on the idea that America is somewhat implicated in this because of the drug war?
Well, I think that yes, America does have some form of implication simply because we're fueling the vehicle of the moment to facilitate the type of government that's usually run in Mexico right now. So in that regard, yes, we do have an implication, but the level of violence, how things are getting dealt with and done, is something that is beyond the drug cartels and the time that they have been taking over these areas. These are actions and habits that have been ingrained in Mexican government well before the drug cartels. It just so happens that the drug cartels are the flavor of the month that are letting all of this happen, and that's the people that they're doing the bidding for.
So, Sean, what do you say about this? Do you think that the drug war is somewhat implicated? You've had a couple of different thoughts during this throughout my time on this show. So, what do you think about the situation here? And then you can open it up to what you think about it.
Well, like obviously the drug war or the federal government exporting the drug war to Latin America has like a lot of negative consequences in those countries. It's actually comparable to what we do, in cases like the Ferguson case, where we're giving weaponry to police departments and then they use that weaponry on their citizens. And like I don't know where the guns came from that were used to kill these kids, but funding and all that stuff has come from the U.S. government for terrible, horrible things. This is like a weird case where it may not be specifically tied to the drug war. I mean, they were protesting for, more funding for their schools and all that. But if you look at like the area of Mexico that this like took place, it's a very poor rural area that used to be a farm town, and a lot of Mexican corn farms Mexican corn farmers and those farm towns were put out of business by American farm subsidies because we flood the market with cheap subsidized corn. So there's a lot of things that the American government can be implicated for. But since I didn't do anything, Americans are totally in the clear.
And that's the regular cable news opinion, so thank you for that. Tom, I want to let you get it, and then I'll let Haven respond to Sean there.
Well, I've been kind of watching this thanks to Twitter and RT, because RT has been amazing in coverage with this. Because Haven brought it up, and I think I was one of the few people in the group that was like, oh yeah, this is happening, and nobody's really talking about it.
Right.
And I didn't, Sean is right, the only way that I could bring this into like my show would have been like equating it to like how Jay Nixon is dealing with Ferguson with everything going there and the unrest there. That's the only way you can bring it to an American perspective, and that to me is why it's not being covered here and that aspect of it. But no, Sean, you're wrong. We are to blame in a lot of this because we like to destabilize countries that don't agree with us, and Reagan did a lot of that. Bush, George Herbert Walker, as well as his son, did a lot of that. And it is sometimes our fault because, you like to say, oh, we're the government and freedom and all that. Well, we're the government. And so take some responsibility, bitch.
Haven, just getting back to that, like, do you buy into like the idea of like the greater problems that the drug war has caused? So going back to what Sean was saying with things such as the rural farm towns that have been kind of ruined by this, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I don't disagree with what Sean's saying, but I do disagree with the extent that people are trying to push this on America. I mean, I am not afraid to call a spade when America is fucking up, but to your point, Tom, about them destabilizing governments, they usually do that with regimes they don't like. And the PRD is a government that's really been cooperating a lot with America, so that it wouldn't be advantageous for them to...
No, but what I mean, and I'm sorry, but what I mean is the long-lasting effects of that. Because when we didn't like the government, that still has long-lasting effects over time. It's that's what I meant where because we knock down one domino, that sometimes takes a little bit of time for it to have a full effect.
We didn't knock down this domino. This is a leftist party that got put into office by the Mexican people because they thought that they were way more legitimate than the authoritarian regime that came through the PRI that was really repressive. So this government is not in here because America put them there or because America toppled off the government prior to. This is something, and this is my point, this is something that is more, has more of a historical factor in it than the drug cartel. By no means I'm not trying to downplay the importance of the drug cartel and the influence of it, because it is the fuel that's enabling all of this right now. But it's kind of like, you know, everybody's trying to say, hey, the car is driving, but, you know, everybody wants to blame the passengers, and they don't really understand that, you know, yes, the drug cartels, they're just ethanol right now. We used to be on hardline oil, we used to be on steam, and now this is just a new way of powering this kind of system that's going on. So with Guerrero and this climate, I mean, there are very much important dates coming around in Mexico right now. Today is the anniversary of the revolution, which is a very important day, and it's used in a very nationalistic fervor for the government. A couple months back, there was the anniversary of the 70s massacre of students, and that in itself brought violence towards peaceful protesters. So Mexico is experiencing this this wave that it constantly has. It's like a cycle, and the climate right now is that the people are starting to wake up and say, oh, you know, we put this new left regime in that said that they were going to do the bidding of the people, and now they're starting to see that they're getting more of the same. So the governmental structure, the institution itself, is molding whoever they're putting in power to continue business as usual. And that's like the major issue that's going on that people aren't really paying attention to.
Right, and I wanna touch on that, but I want to push back against Tom. We are not the government. The government is the they. I didn't vote for Reagan. I didn't vote for. I wasn't even alive when Reagan was president. I didn't vote for any of the Bushes or the Clintons. Like, I didn't do any of that shit. Like, I'm a normal citizen. That was the government. That was Richard Nixon's drug war. Every president following him's drug war. Us supporting Calderon. Like, all those things. But like, this should be, and I know we're going to get into this later. This should be covered in our media over here, because this is old time like corruption. Like, we don't usually see stories like this where the government will just massacre protesters. Like, if this happened in Hong Kong, like, it would be all over the news, because Hong Kong is a very capitalist society, a very capitalist territory, and they would be massacred by a communist government or a communist in name government. Like, this should be like on the news, like maybe not graphically on the news, but this is old school corruption. Like, this is what old corrupt governments did. Like, they would murder people in the streets. Like, this is like obvious. This is like mafia. Like, I know it's there's cartel involvement, but this is like mafia stuff. They murdered them and they dumped the bodies. And when people came asking around for them, they're like, oh, well, they had it coming. I don't know what happened to them, but they had it coming. Like, this is crazy. Like, it should be all over the news.
No, and that I agree with you, but at least you're consistent libertarian, and like, I take no responsibility for this.
But also, you guys
not my problem.
You have to understand that national interest for the U.S. has to look at what are the factors that are causing these situations to happen. And it's very scary to constantly put out in the news young people rising up, using social media to voice the needs that they need for their community. That's not a trend that we want to stylize. That's something that the government wouldn't want to push out. You know, we're not really that friendly with that kind of protest. We haven't seen that in decades, and to be honest, I don't think that the government would want to see that kind of protest in decades. So there is an incentive to kind of just ignore what's going on and why it's going on. I mean, for the most part, Americans are already uneducated about Mexico in general, period. They kind of just think Tijuana, donkey shows, and cocaine. That's it. So it's like we don't want to educate our people because that means that the light bulb's going to go on. It's okay to see uprising in the Middle East, somewhere in Syria or some shit, where it's way the fuck over there, and none of us can find it on a fucking map. But when you start saying people are rising in Mexico, and look at what these kids are doing, and this is what they're fighting for, there might be the millennials in this country might say, you know what, if it's working for them, maybe these tactics we need to start adopting, and that's something that we don't want to really promote.
Do you really think, Haven, do you really think that there's that's the reason, like, it's not just America doesn't, care about other countries, it's not going to do well, it's not going to get clicks? Like, do you really think there's a deeper, reasoning for this, for not getting in the press?
Yes, of course. I mean, yes, Americans are apathetic. That's very true. But, I'm a millennial myself. I talk with a lot of millennials. I talk to a lot of people in the military. People aren't dumb. They're not stupid. They're not ignorant. It's just, it's hard to talk on something that nobody brings to your attention. It's hard to have an opinion on something. The very foundations of what you need to be focusing on was not taught to you. And that's the mode of operandi in this country. It's hard for people to be involved politically when civics class is a fucking joke, where people don't know branches of government. It's impossible to get an informed electorate or an informed citizenry. So it's like we're having a difficult time for Americans to start paying attention and giving a fuck about things that are happening within the country because we are so blocked from knowledge. So it makes it even worse when it's our neighbors. And, for the most part, the only people that really do care are the people that are on the border be directly affected to it. And they are going to be the direct recipients of whatever goes down there. And, America is just so big, and it's really difficult to educate people for them to even care in the first place.
All right, sorry, I saw you jumping in there, Sean, so go ahead.
Yeah, Mexicans don't make good TV. Like, they'll show Middle East uprising because you could cut in that clip of the training session on the monkey bars. You could find a Death to America sign. Like, the Mexican protesters, they don't make that kind of good TV. You're not gonna scare anybody that that people from Mexico are gonna come here and do terrorism. Like, you're gonna the only way in America people are afraid of Mexicans is when they come over the border to pick tomatoes. Like, that's what terrifies us about Mexicans.
That's kind of what I was surprised about, though, that this wasn't driven into that fear narrative, considering what we just talked about at the top of the show with the upcoming speech of Obama. I'm surprised this wasn't like a Fox News Benghazi, like hammer away at something. What happens here?
Dan, to interrupt real quick, the only reason that it wasn't is because Fast and Furious was nowhere involved with it. If Fast and Furious was somehow involved with this, you bet Fox News would cover this 24/7. Where are the guns? Where did they come from? Just throw one of those Fast and Furious guns there. You got Fox News on it, maybe.
And they did have Ebola, and now they've got Gruber. So I guess unfortunately for Mexico, they fell out of the. If it bleeds
you also have to look at the narrative. This is something that would garner empathy, sympathy for Mexicans.
I don't agree with that. I think it would have scared America.
America's not really easy. I mean, like, a lot of people think we're easily scared, but we're really not. And when it comes to
whoa, hold on. You don't think Americans are easily scared?
No.
Ebola much?
I think that our actions are done mostly out of blatant ignorance than out of fear, so that we don't know. But as far as hearing this story, when you hear and when you see the news stories, you're seeing parents, you're seeing mothers and fathers crying over their children. That's going to garner up empathy for Mexicans and people that we're supposed to not have empathy for. I don't know if you guys remember this, but way back when, Jeb Bush, said that immigrants aren't that bad because they're coming here out of love and wanting to take care of their family financially. And the Republican Party raked him through the fucking coals. Like, he was the top contender to run for president, and then all of a sudden, that motherfucker wasn't shit because he showed some type of humanity towards people that are supposed to be evil. So Fox News is not going to run a story that's going to make the people that were supposed to be like, get away, get out, you're probably with ISIS, or you have cantaloupe-sized calves of cocaine. Like, you can't say that to somebody when you can identify with them. And they're not going to want to promote that narrative.
I agree with you in parts, but I really think you could have ran with the fear factor there. I don't think this is too much empathetic because the government's doing things. You could empathize a bit with the people, but I mean, at the same time, you're running into the same situations that they worry about. But I really do think Americans are easily scared. Whether you want to take a look at ISIS, whether you want to take a look at almost any war that you've got yourselves in during the last 25 years.
That's a bullshit media fucking. Ugh, I hate that.
Haven, I'm sorry.
If you walk down the street, I can walk down the street right now and be like, hey, what are you scared of? ISIS or the police officer that's staring at us right now? They're going to say the police officer. Americans are not scared of ISIS. We understand that it's a problem. We're not really scared of Ebola. We're like, oh shit, that's fucking crazy. It's not something that
public opinion polling disagrees with you on that.
And not to mention, I can do hard stuff here. In Ferguson, because of how the media has ginned up this, and I blame left and right media, they are buying guns at a rapid rate in the Ferguson area. So I'm really worried for the children and mothers and daughters of Ferguson when this verdict comes out. I fear that someone is going to get shot because some idiot just acts stupid. And that's the fact, and that's fear brought on by the media. So I think it's a little disingenuous to just say no, there's no fear here. But you're right.
I'm saying that we're not easily scared. If it's something that's directly affecting us, then sure, we're gonna be like, oh shit, there's cops. But for the most part, Americans are not this like coddled puppy that you say boo one time and it's automatically like, oh shit. Because if that were the case, then everybody would be buying guns. If we were that easy,
everybody is buying. Okay, let's not wander too far off topic. Let me go.
Chicago, people would be buying a shit ton of guns all around the city of Chicago because people call it Chirac, but they're not doing that. So how much are we really scared, and how much are we just saying it because like that's just something to be said? Like, I don't think that we're really as scared as people want to tell us that we are.
I think you're right to a point, but I'll shut up after this, I promise, Dan. I think you're right to a point, but then you have Glenn Beck, and you have you really need to look at how the right wing is treating things more lately, because they are adding fuel to the fire to make it worse, and then they can be able to have their meme that they bring out and say, see, we were right, see?
But they tried to do that in Ferguson the first protest, and that's not what happened. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to play into the narrative of, oh shit, the government is bringing out these major, weapons and military type artillery. Oh my god, what's going to happen? What are the citizens going to do? It's like, we're not ignorant. We're not stupid. We're not fucking animals. We can peacefully protest. We have peacefully protest. And it's so true in the fact that they will try to provoke, because that's what happened in Ferguson. People were provoking the situation.
All right, let's go. Let's get back.
To be scared.
Let's get back a little bit to topics before we wind up arguing another topic. Here's the thing that I want to get back to. So speaking of peaceful protests, speaking of protests in general, let's head back to our main topic here. Is there silver lining in this? Do you think this will result in any sort of changes, Haven, in Mexico?
I think the changes are happening now. Like, if anybody wants to go and look at the revolution in the 70s and the revolution back in the 1800s for the freedom from Spain, a lot of the same fervor that's going down is happening right now. And it's rare to see Mexico and Mexican citizens address the government itself. And a lot of what the messages that they're putting out on their banners and everything is calling into question the legitimacy of the government. And from what I've studied, every time that happens, something changes. So I don't know what, maybe escalate, hopefully not, it probably will. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a change because the citizens themselves are no longer being passive about what the government is doing. They're calling into question their legitimacy now.
All right, let's. Anyone have final thoughts around the table on this, Sean?
Yeah, I don't see silver linings in a lot of tragedies. Like I don't know. I'll have to see the change before I'm gonna be like, yay, 43 people died, but something good came out of it. Like, no, it's a tragedy right now, and whether that invokes something, I don't call it I don't think it's a silver lining. It's 43 young people, or 43 people needed to died that didn't need to be hurt in any way.
Can it bring change, or do you see any sort of change happening post tragedy then?
I don't know. We've seen like massacres by like the Chinese government of protesters, and didn't lead to much change. You know what I mean? So I don't think so. I hope so. I hope something changes, but I believe it when I see it. So the answer is no, not C.
All right, Tom, final thoughts on this.
I wish our media was sometimes half as good as Archie is in covering stuff, which is kind of sad to say because they're controlled by Putin.
Man, way to lay down the positivity, gang.